I've talked a lot in the past about the way Supermassive Games builds a big secret into their games, a mystery at the core of the story that has evidence pointing to the solution, but never actually gets confirmed within the narrative. I'm happy to find that this practice has continued into the casting of Frank Stone, with one of their most amazing secrets yet, specifically that Christine Gordon, the director of Murder Mill, and Augustine Lieber are different versions of the same person. It seems like an outlandish concept at first, but the clues stack up pretty conclusively. Let's start with the strangest thing that happens in the entire game. Chris getting pulled to the mansion by the Horlogium. Why does this happen? No clear explanation, or any explanation, is ever offered. We don't see anyone operating the machine. In fact, other than Sam using the Horlogium to jump to another universe, we never actually see the controls being operated to activate the machine. The only thing we see the Horlogium do is collect versions of Augustine Lieber, the extremely old lady we see arrive here, and the one that gets pulled out at the end of the game. The Augustine we've been watching, in the silk suit and white shirt, was sacrificed to the entity at the end, making her of no further use to the oldest Augustine, so that Augustine simply summoned another from a similar timeline, this one wearing a wool suit and a black shirt. The very fact that the Horlogium pulls Christine out of her reality proves immediately that she's a variant of Augustine Lieber. But I think we can go a little deeper than that. Not only is there plenty of evidence supporting this, but we can use this information to figure out exactly how deep Augustine's planning goes. What do we know about Augustine Lieber? Almost nothing. She's got a mansion and a dimension-jumping machine, and based on the paintings all around her mansion and her own comments, she has lived for hundreds of years. She talks about entering new timelines as new people, and crucially, she points out that Augustine Lieber is just a name she selected, noting that names are how we define ourselves. According to her, an Augustine Lieber called something else would be someone else, which is exactly what Christine Gordon is. In some of the endings, Christine can pause to comment on how familiar Augustine seemed. You can read this as her coming close to figuring out that Augustine was the Needful Things lady, which she was, but that's a stretch, considering that they don't really look or sound alike. No, the key is in the next line, where the term broken mirror is used to describe her. That's why she seems so familiar to Christine. They look uncannily similar. Not identical, they're separated by well over a decade in age, but close enough that looking at Augustine was, to Christine, like looking in a slightly warped mirror. Once you accept that Christine is an alternate Augustine, suddenly the plot of the game makes a lot more sense. Look at Augustine's comments about Sam screwing up the ritual. She had to come up with a backup plan, which was the movie. But how could she make that happen enough times that she got all of the footage she needed? The answer is that she created Christine Gordon to do it. It's not an accident that Christine is primed to be obsessed with horror movies and Frank Stone, and it's not an accident that she's from out of town. Without knowing it, Christine has been groomed to fill the role she plays in the story. Augustine has a machine for grabbing versions of herself from across the multiverse. It wouldn't be that complicated to grab a version of herself from wherever she originally existed and have a baby version be adopted in America in the 1960s. Then, all she would have to do would be tweak Christine's life to make her interested in film and have her family move to Cedar Hills, and based on how the multiverse works in the game, she would soon have countless versions of Christine making the film Murder Mill, more than enough to eventually get her the Frank Stone footage she needs. So not only did Augustine cast Frank Stone as her champion, she cast a younger version of herself as the director that caused him to come back to life. This might sound like a stretch, but ask yourself, with all the trouble she went to in order to create Frank Stone in the first place, is there really any chance that she'd just hang out and hope someone decided to make Murder Mill? Of course not. Murder Mill is her plan B. This still leaves one question unanswered. Why did Christine get pulled through the portal into Garant Mansion? There's an answer to this question as well, and it starts with another question. How is Augustine still alive? How has she had all of these lives and timelines? She demonstrates no magical abilities of her own, and she's certainly quite killable, and definitely not bulletproof. Beyond a wealth of knowledge and some decent sleight of hand skills, she seems to be a normal enough woman. Yet, she's been around forever. and we see both younger and older versions of her. How is this possible? The important thing to understanding how she lives forever is how the machine works. It doesn't just pull you bodily into another dimension. It can rearrange bodies, as we learn in the Inside Out Christine death that's caused by waiting too long to use the machine to send her home. The other important note is exactly when Christine is grabbed by the machine. Once she's triggered Frank Stone's resurrection, Christine exists only for this moment, to film Frank's victims with the magic camera, bringing him back to life so that his essence can be captured on film. Everything Augustine has done to manipulate Christine's life exists only for this moment. Once that's been accomplished, she is no longer necessary for the process. She can finish the film, and in many dimensions, she likely does. But she's no longer necessary for Augustine's purposes, since the rest of the crew can capture Frank Stone just as easily. The moment she wakes Frank up, she is redundant, and that's why she's grabbed then, because she's a surplus version of Augustine. Which brings us back to the why in question. Why is she grabbed, and how does that tie into Augustine's immortality? The answer to that is right in front of our faces. What happens just after Christine escapes the sarcophagus? What was in the process of happening before Maddie turned the machine off? A version of Augustine was being pulled out of the multiverse, the oldest version we've seen. And in fact, this is the version who's narrating the game. So what would have happened if Maddie hadn't shut off the machine? The oldest Augustine would have been ported into a sarcophagus that already contained a trapped Christine. This wasn't a mistake, and it wasn't an accident. It's what her plan was. The oldest version of Augustine was going to steal Christine's body, transporting her mind into a younger version of herself. This is how Augustine has lived forever, and how we can see her at so many different ages in so many different places. Whenever she needs to, she simply steals a body from one of her younger variants. What does this mean for a sequel to the game or a continuation of Augustine's story? Well, whatever the plot winds up being, don't be surprised if we see Christine again in one way or another. Until then, though, I've been the Hidden Object Guru. Thanks for watching. If you had a good time and you'd like to see more, there's buttons coming up to help with that. Questions, comments, your own theories about what's going on in the game, go in the comment section below the video. Now that you're done Frank Stone, hopefully, and if you haven't bought it yet, why are you watching a really in-depth theory video? Buy the game. It's amazing. But also, play my game, Clown in the Woods, which, I'm not going to say it's as good as Frank Stone, but it's a lot of fun. Anyway, we'll see you back here for more Frank Stone videos. But until then, I'll say that's right. Au revoir.